This is really big. Oh, wow! This is really big, Daddy.
Fun parts of gardening are planting and harvest. And I have to admit that most of my videos are generally made around those two sections. But in between planting and harvest, there's the boring bits. What are they? Well, I think of them mostly as being weeding and watering. Now, weeding is something that you can try and reduce quite a bit. And I think as much as you can do to reduce weeding is a really good idea. I find that using compost like I do here in the raised beds and no-dig systems really works fantastically to reduce the amount of weeding that I need to do. There's still sometimes weeds that will come through, small weeds will come up, and these are generally easily removed with a fork or something like that and just raking through it and disturbing the roots, and the sun will do the rest for you. Of course, occasionally you'll find some really deep-rooted plants that have escaped your notice, and you really need to get in, particularly some things like dandelions and cat's ear. You really need to get in and get those roots out because they'll keep coming back from the roots otherwise. One thing to be wary of though is when you're actually getting those small weeds out of compost, keep an eye out for any volunteers that may be there, because those plants can be really valuable in your garden and save you the effort of planting. Now, it depends what they are as to whether you can move them. Some things like tomatoes or lettuce, for example, can easily be relocated and will transplant happily, whereas others like these parsnips really don't like being moved, and you really have to accept that where they are is where they're going to grow. Now, this year we've had plenty of rain here in Tassie and watering hasn't been an issue for me. But because of that extra rain we've had, the weed growth has been really incredible. And of course the fact that it has been raining makes it difficult to get in and do the weeding also. So as you can see, the weed growth in this corn has been really crazy, and it's only been probably not much more than a week since I went through it with the wheel hoe, but because of the rain we've had, it's really grown. But what I have to do today is not only to weed it, but I also need to go and thin it, because I always tend to put a couple of seeds in each location and I really only want one to grow. So where they're far enough apart, I will pull one out and leave the other to grow. But if they're a little bit too close, I tend to snip them off rather than pull them out and disturb roots. I've armed myself with a small hand hoe because I'm going to be working very close to the roots and can't afford to make mistakes, and because this job's going to take a little while, I've got a good audio book to listen to. So I'm going to clean these weeds out, and then I'll come through with the wheel hoe and hill these up again and clean the areas in between, because I can do that with the wheel hoe very easily. Because I grow potatoes in cycle from one bed to another, they easily become one of the major weeds in my garden, because it's very difficult to get every last small potato out. Along the side here, there's been a collection over 2 or 3 years of potato build-up that I haven't really taken much notice of. But this year it's just way out of hand and it's pushing on my corn. So what I'm going to do at this stage is go and cut it back, and it's almost ready for harvest. And so when it is, I'll come through and harvest these potatoes, and I may have to actually sift the soil out, I think, to make sure that I don't have remnant potatoes there, because it's taking over and becoming a problem. Generally speaking though, I do welcome the odd potato in a corner, because it's extra potatoes you didn't plant but you can still harvest. But when it becomes too much like this, you need to get them out. Like here, you'll see I've pulled out potatoes that were growing with the corn, because when they're growing with other plants, you don't want them. They are basically a weed at that stage. But when they're in a corner, you can often let them go. So I'll just cut this back. A sickle is quite an easy tool to do it, and that'll quickly get them out of my road. A quick rake up of the larger weeds that are good for the compost, clears it, and then I'm ready to come in with the wheel hoe and hill this corn. It'll give it more support for the wind and keep the roots damper. The wheel hoe is ideal for this type of job, and having the wheel hoe is probably one of the reasons why I grow corn this way. I was planning to use the other wheel hoe in between, but it's not working it out. I think a quick scrape with the fork hoe will do the job nicely. Here in the watermelons, I had the same issue. Nature has taken good care of the watering process, and so the weeds have grown. Now I have been through just with the fork hoe probably a week ago and loosened up the rest of the soil, but I didn't disturb the mounds because I didn't want to disturb any chance of germination. Some of these watermelons have been very slow germinating, and there's still some coming through. But because the weeds are growing like this now, I really can't wait any longer. I need to pull these weeds out before they just get too large. The germination of these watermelons, as I say, has been very slow, and I think that's the cooler soil temperatures here is the cause of that. In the greenhouse they're doing much better and really starting to move faster. I think what I will do here is bring out some plastic bottles and put over them so that there's a bit more protection and a little bit more heat, just to give them some extra encouragement. But first, some weeding. With the weeds like this, I have to be really careful to first locate these watermelons, and there's some in here amongst the weeds that have germinated, and these seeds are precious, so I need to be careful not to pull them out. I've got a third one over there, so I need to give them all a chance to grow. So first isolating those, and then I can become savage and get these weeds out. Now, if you recall, and you can see here that I have actually put the compost on top of the soil. It obviously was not thick enough to suppress the weeds. It kept the moisture in, but that actually only served to assist the weed seed that was underneath. I think a lot of the advantage of the no-dig compost system is gained after a number of years, where you are successfully burying the weed seed much deeper into the soil. It's amazing how long weed seed will survive in the soil buried though. You bring it to the surface and away it goes. You can see here possibly the little yellowing, which I think is caused by the coolness. It's showing that they're just not having the same perfect environment that they're getting in the greenhouse. The weather here in Tasmania can be fickle. Right at the moment it's reasonably warm, but some nights it can get cool again, so it's a bit unpredictable at this time of the year. So a quick rake through with the fork hoe will loosen up the weeds that are growing around these watermelons, and the sun will do the rest and kill them off. Here in the tomatoes I've used some sugarcane mulch. Now the beauty of this is that it is pretty much weed free, and any mulch that is weed free is really good in the garden. The problem is that sugarcane mulch is very expensive where I live here, because Tasmania is a long way from where it's produced. Now, there's always somewhat of a trade-off in terms of cost versus time in weed control. And here, with the sugarcane mulch, we've got quite an expensive option where we're spending a lot of money, whereas the way I've worked with the corn, I spend time. However, as the corn grows, it will create shade, and that will suppress the weeds in itself, and I won't have to put that labour in. Here in Tassie, often we resort to using straw as a weed control, as a mulch. However, straw also can have quite a lot of weed in it sometimes. As you'll see in my straw bale garden at the moment, there is a lot of weeds coming. So I have used the straw in the tomatoes previously and found also that there was a lot of wheat germination, which created another problem in itself that needed to be controlled. So while this sugarcane mulch, I really haven't spread it as thick or as far as I would like to, it has done some work in suppressing the weeds and kept it to a minimum. There's still some work to do though in terms of this path. I need to come through with the chipping hoe and clean that up. So whichever method you choose, whether you choose to use mulches or composts, do remember to come back into your garden and do some maintenance, because that's really going to pay off in the long term. With mulches, if you're actually managing to get the mulch and keep it down, you're not going to have that much work to do, but there's still going to be that little bit of maintenance because there's going to be a few weeds escape. Or if you're in open ground and cultivating, it's a matter of some regular time, but the more regular you are, the less time you will spend, because you'll keep them under control, and that's a really good thing.